So a little while ago, I made a video discussing how I think Remo Shifu Killingham and Brook could have a connection. I was on the money in that a connection will be formed between Brook and the Holy Knight, just not the right Holy Knight, but there could still be something there. Go check that video out. However, we find out in chapter 1144, which then continues into 1146 and 1147, that Gunkko is a Soul King fan and that she most likely has been listening to his music for a long time. Now, what's so interesting about this is that I think what we find out more about her relationship to Brook is going to reveal that the decision he made on the return to Sabody Archipelago speaks volumes about his character, but then also has a lot of repercussions. Kind of like how in Jaya, Sanji gives a throwaway line about being from the North Blue, and that translates into a whole series of arcs in which we find out about his family and all that and his further evolution as a character. But what I think is going to happen is that when we get more context about the concert, we're going to see a lot of places Brook went on tour at. And then I think we're going to see that Gunkko was abusing her Mark of the Abyss to teleport to those places, literally following Brook like a groupie in between Holy Night missions so she can catch these live concerts. What's going to be even more fascinating is that she'll probably be seen at Sabody Archipelago, and she'll be there in a flashback, most likely, to see the announcement of his retirement, which is going to give her some very interesting context. At least that's what I think. Another reason why I think this could be true is because quite recently we got a little special movie called One Piece Fan Letter, in which we actually see Brook's effect on the world, as so many fans in Sabody Archipelago are coming to his concert. And one of the characters that we focus on is a fangirl of his who works at a convenience store of some sort. So I could see Gunkko being one of those fans who was there to watch his final concert. But continuing, why I think this is going to be such a big boon for his character and give you so much context is because when we first find Brook, he is a man that has been stripped of everything, even stripped of things that don't even seem logically possible to be stripped of, because he's been stripped of his personhood. He's just a skeleton. He's not the same man that joined the Rhubarb Pirates and became their captain eventually. He is a skeleton. He is aboard a vessel that contains the corpses of his dead former crewmates. And now, due to his various visits to Thular Bark, he was captured by Moria and now has been stripped of his shadow. Then that shadow takes every opportunity in combat to belittle him and belittle the one thing he has left of his former life, which is his afro. This is in stark contrast to when we find him in the time skip, because now he has become a worldwide celebrity. Everybody knows his name, and yet he gives all of that up, literally going from loneliness to being absolutely famous. He gives all of that up because the fame is not as important as his honor as a man. He made a promise to the people who brought him out of that darkness, and he made a promise to Laboon, the one he had to leave behind. Now, the rub of the plot in this is that Gunkko was most likely there when he announced his retirement, but as a fan, she doesn't understand why he stopped making music, and to be told now to her face that he would rather die than to give up on his honor as a man to simply be her music slave. She is completely distraught. Her hero, her idol now, presumably, is telling her that her entertainment is not worth it to him. As a celestial dragon, this has to be the most devastating news to receive, because as a celestial dragon, you get everything you want, and now you're being presented with something that you cannot have. Therefore, I do wonder, is this going to serve any other implications in the future? Because it was even seen at the time as a great monumental decision that Brook gave up his life as a rock star to continue his life of piracy. Frankie talks about this in this Return to the Sabody Archipelago arc. So it's interesting now that we're being presented with the possible consequences of that decision, and how Brook, despite being confronted with a powerful enemy, stands 10 toes down on his decision. It would be even crazier if Brook's obsession with seeing women's panties is the reason why Gunkko dresses in the way she does now. Can you imagine that a person that you've shaped your entire life around tells you no, and now you have to cope with the reality that they aren't the person you thought they were? This actually is very much in lockstep with our first visit to Sabody Archipelago, because in our first visit, before we enter the island proper, we fight the Flying Fish Riders. In that fight, it is the first time in the series in which Brook uses his music offensively to put some of the Flying Fish Riders, as well as Luffy and Chopper, to sleep. What's interesting about this further is that this is also the arc in which we are introduced to a celestial dragon properly for the first time. So it rhymes very well if Gunkko was there at the Return to Sabody Archipelago arc to see Brook's final concert, because much like the first time we were at Sabody Archipelago, we're seeing the lowest form of a celestial dragon, and then upon the return, we're seeing the penultimate version of a celestial dragon, which is a holy knight. What is also very interesting about all this is that when Brook was pawed away by Kuma, he was set up in a situation in which occultists were under the impression that they had summoned him from hell, as if he was Satan, right? And we see that he appears in the middle of a magic circle, a pentagram-like shape. This is funny because now we have a fan of his who literally travels via magic circle, via pentagram, and most likely was using the same ability to stalk him on his world tour, presumably. I don't know exactly how or why Brook knows what a holy knight is. However, it is implied during the Kuma flashback that holy knights, as well as the five elders, seem to visit the world below more often during the days of Roger and Zebek, which is when Brook was active, because we see them on God Valley. We see Saturn walking around. We see Figgle and Garland walking around. So it's possible that holy knights were more frequent during that time, as opposed to now when they only pop up for important missions, presumably. It would be wild if Gunkko gave up her identity as a holy knight to him in private because she was that big of a fan. But this could also lead into his past as a member of a battle convoy for a certain kingdom. I don't actually know, but it does bring up some very interesting questions. With that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Works It.